Welcome back to another edition of Gary's Record Collection. Today we are going back to the vaults of the BBC 1969, June 27th as a matter of fact. That was the appearance of Led Zeppelin at the Playhouse Theatre. This recording has been around obviously since 69, but it was not really officially released until, for the most part, in 1997. One song actually was released in 1990 on the first Led Zeppelin box set. Let's go back a bit though. Before 1990, the only way that you would have heard this concert was either on something like the Westwood One Superstar Rock Concert Series or the BBC Rock Hour. They would play these concerts every now and then, and it was an event on radio. It's like tune in Thursday night at 8 for the Led Zeppelin concert from 1969, and they would play a whole bunch of this concert. And that's one way you would hear it. The other would be on from bootlegs. And of course, I have a bootleg here. This is, the four symbols. And if you look on the back, here's like the songs, Communication Breakdown, I Can't Quit You Baby, White Summer, You Shook Me, and How Many More Times. Not the entire concert, but you get a bunch of it. And in the CD era, a bunch of CDs, bootleg CDs came out too. Classics Off the Air was one of them. This is from the Swingin' Pig, White Summer. Has a bunch of that concert on here. This is the most complete one. It's called Rock Hour. That has everything on the concert, and that's important because we're going to talk about that. And also Mess of Blues. This was an Italian release in 1989, and it was funny about those Italian releases because they were sort of legal. The laws was like you could put the recordings out as long as you paid the artist. So they set up a fund, they put the artist, and the way I remember it was they put in an account and they told the artist that it was available for them to get it if they wanted it. So it wasn't, instead of mailing a check to the artist, it sounded like they made the artist go into the bank account themselves to retrieve the money. Seems like a very early version of Venmo or PayPal or something like that. So finally in 1990, here comes the first Led Zeppelin box set. Everything was remastered and it sounded great. And one of the things they added was the version from the BBC concert in 69 of White Summer, which was Jimmy Page's acoustic, and he was in the spotlight for it. It wasn't acoustic really because he was playing it on a Dan Electro guitar, but it was him solo, middle of the stage, single spotlight. And that's what he played. So that was 1990 it came out. And it came out in a little bit of an edited form. And you talk about edited forms, and here comes BBC Sessions, which came out in 1997, 98? 97, I think. And it doesn't have everything on here. It has a lot of stuff, but it doesn't have the entire concert. And so, fans, we suffered through that. It's like, well, we're going to have to rely on our bootlegs to get it. But wait a minute, here comes, in the era of the box set, the complete BBC Sessions. All right, this gives us hope, right? Everything's going to be on here because it says right on the cover, complete. Now, Jimmy Page would not lie to us about a thing like that, would he? Well, when it came to paying royalties, yeah, he did. So we're going to go through a few things here that are on the 1969 concert. It's not just BBC Sessions, but that's a pretty good representation. So let's start off. First of all, there's a whole introduction right at the beginning. So let's take a listen to that. This is from the DJ, Alan Black.
Good evening and welcome to the Led Zeppelin Show. The purpose of the program tonight is to provide a platform which allows bands removed from the normal confines of the record industry and free from commercial manipulation to present a true statement about their music. Bands we know as underground, heavy, rock, blues, progressive do have a limited outlet on mass media shows, but usually on family entertainment policy shows which restrict their performances, it has been claimed, by limiting the time of numbers and possibly style and content. For this program, we wanted to give a band complete creative freedom and the opportunity to communicate. We chose Led Zeppelin.
And they start with Communication Breakdown. It's like that was their big song at the time.
Hey, yeah,
Now you heard at the beginning, it was like, he was like, we're going to have Led Zeppelin, and then they just start into it. On some of the radio broadcasts in the 70s and the 80s, they actually dovetailed some audience applause in there too, so it wasn't just such a dry start to the show. Now I also talked about how they cut things, and they actually cut a little bit out of this song, so we're going to skip ahead here. This is the little funky interlude version before they come back to the main melody. So let's take a listen to this. And they didn't want to pay the Isley Brothers the copyright fees for It's Your Thing, so out. It was out on the first version of BBC Sessions, and it's still out on the complete version of BBC Sessions. So again, the only way to get to it is the bootleg. Communication Breakdown followed up by I Can't Quit You, Baby. And this is a full version of it. There's no cuts in this at all. After that, at the actual show, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant were interviewed by Alan Black.
Well, I don't think there was very much restricted about those two numbers from Led Zeppelin. Well, we'll not only be hearing Led Zeppelin play tonight, we'll also be talking to them, because I'd like to put a couple of questions to the two members of the band who've now joined me. On my left, Robert Plant, the lead vocalist, and you also play harmonica, Robert, right?
When permitting.
Yeah. And on my right, Jimmy Page, lead guitarist. Well, I'd like to ask you first, what do you feel about this question of restricting the performance of bands such as yours on mass media programs? One does hear about bands being turned down by television companies because they're sort of not suitable for family audiences, they say. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's very true, because there's only really one outlet for our sort of band, you know, like Jethro Tull and 10 Years After, this sort of band. And that's...
and that was the thing about the BBC. It's like they had very tight restrictions on song length, and you couldn't deviate from that. And here you have a band like Led Zeppelin, who they took those numbers that they recorded and started stretching them out. Like Dazed and Confused is in this show. On the album was like 8.5 minutes. It's 11 minutes here. I mean, by the time they got done up to their last version of Dazed and Confused, March 27th, in the USA, March 27th, 75, it was 43 minutes long. How do you play that on the radio? I mean, that doesn't fit on one side of an album. So, I mean, they were great bathroom break songs, I guess, but with the tight regulations of the BBC at the time, if you were over 3 minutes, they didn't want to have anything to do with you. This program is also interesting, too, because it had a comedy sketch in it by something called the Liverpool Scene.
I'd like to present a commercial break.
And it was the first episode of this show, so I think they were trying things out and see what stuck and see what didn't stick.
Get PAD, nuclear meat for humans.
Don't give your family ordinary meat, give them PAD.
PAD. Prolongs active death.
Enriched with nourishing marrowbone strontium.
All over
Okay.
the world, more and more people are changing to BOM. BOM, the international passport to smoking ruins.
And really no surprise that this was not included in the complete BBC sessions. It had nothing to do with Led Zeppelin. I mean, it just kind of is like sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not part of the actual musical presentation. I mean, even the interviews stuck into the middle of the show seems a little bit out of place. But I mean, they were trying something new. So let's skip ahead to the end. Another victim of the editing. Well, actually, the we mentioned White Summer at the beginning was on a 1990 box set, and for some reason they edited out like 10 or 15 seconds of it. It's like, how bad is 10 or 15 seconds? But Jimmy Page, I guess, didn't want it. He brought it. He took it out, but finally it came back in with the complete BBC Sessions box set that came out a few years ago. Let's skip ahead to the end. This is How Many More Times. And traditionally at this time, they would use this number as the number to close the show, and it was also to introduce all of the band members. Here's Alan Black again from the BBC.
Beautiful contrast in stars there. Well, I could go on listening forever to Led Zeppelin. I don't know if they could go on playing forever, but it's time now to wind up. So I'm going to hand you over now to Robert Plant, who's about to reenact for you a typical Led Zeppelin stage show closing. So listen carefully.
Ma 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 ma. Well, I think it's time to say, ladies and gentlemen, we gotta put a close to everything. I'd like to introduce, as we go out, I'd like to introduce Led Zeppelin to you. On bass guitar, John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones. On drums, John Bonham. Lead guitar, Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Page with that Smokestack Lightning riff that he favored in 1969. And this closing with the introduction right into How Many More Times, very typical of the era, and that happened when they were on Danish television just a few months earlier. The full version of Danish TV, which you'll see on YouTube, has that where Robert Plant introduces everybody in the band. But when it came to the box set that came out in 2003, they said, you know what, we're going to cut that. We don't need that. Which is a shame, because I think it sets the context. It's like they were not even a year old at that time, and they were bursting onto the scene, and the first album was going up the charts, and they still felt the need to introduce themselves. They had the pictures on the back of the album, but they needed to introduce themselves. By the time Led Zeppelin 2 came out, they were so popular they didn't need to do that. But it's just like historical context. I don't know why they decided all these years later that was it not appropriate? Was it fluff or something like that? Maybe Jimmy Page didn't want to pay the royalty for Smokestack Lightning. That's also a possibility too. But so, like I said, there's so many versions of this out here. The one that you want to get, if you're looking for the complete version of it, you want the one that's called Rock Hour. It's probably available on YouTube. I don't know. I haven't looked. I got this many years ago. This is actually a copy. I got it from one of the many download sites that are on the internet that have all of these things. But there you go. The BBC Sessions, the Rock Hour from 1969. It's not even an hour long if you take out the interview and the comedy skit. It's like about 50 minutes, but it's great music. A very good representation of where the band was at that time. So listen to it, enjoy it. It's a beautiful thing. Hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you next time on Gary's Record Collection.